All right, welcome back to the Life on Purpose podcast. I have a very special guest today, Billy Mandarino, the Nowist, right? So you wrote this book, The Nowist. You are an author, a teacher, really. I mean, everything that I've been able to kind of put together, that's really, you're a teacher, a leader. Um, you've got an interesting story, interesting background. So I really look forward to kind of seeing where this goes. We were kind of talking before we started recording about just natural conversations, seeing kind of where, like you said, where God takes us. So I want you to tell me just a little bit about kind of maybe your background and how the Nowist came about. So here it is. I started diving into it just a couple days ago, and I told you off camera before we started recording that it was perfectly timed for me. So
Thank you,
welcome,
Brandy.
welcome to the
Thank you.
podcast.
I'm honored to be here. I appreciate you having me as a guest to serve your viewers, your listeners. It's always my honor just to share this message that I think the world, actually, I know the world is in desperate need of. We're so caught up in time, linear time, chronological time, past, future, goal setting, comparison. I call it infobesity. We're obese with information. And when you have that kind of obesity in your life, of course, you get out of balance. You get into dis-ease. And the Nowist found me probably a decade ago when I was having similar problems of being overwhelmed, caught up in the past trauma, caught up in striving and wishing things were different and never really honoring the only power that I have, which is the present moment.
Mhm.
And it was a series of synchronicities that brought me to that. We can talk about that later, but ultimately, it was the power of the present moment that this book came through me. This teaching, the word, the nowist didn't exist prior to this. It came through me. And the book that you purchased, thank you very much,
Yeah,
is a spiritual memoir about how I found the present moment to be the most powerful and transformative moment of your day that rarely do people spend much time in.
right.
In the book, I teach you how to live 90% as the present moment awareness being, as a nowist, and 10% in physical time, doing the emails, picking up the kids from school, doing your bills, everything you have to do in the physical world. The
Hmm.
problem is the inverse is true. Most people spend 90% of the day caught up in the minutia and the stress and the overwhelm and the anxiety, and 10% going to church on Sunday or meditating or praying or going to a yoga class. I've just learned that this can be taught. It's not as difficult as people would think it is. It's just a matter of starting a new habit and being committed and consistent.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me, like you said, how in the minutia we do get. And I think a lot of it, nobody gets to where you are. And like you said, this book coming through you and the nowest um ideas coming through you without kind of that getting caught up in, like you said, that past trauma. We don't get there with an easy life typically.
Yes. We
Um,
need those challenges. We need that resistance. It's important. You need contrast to really know where you're supposed to be and really
right.
what's your purpose? What's your dharma? What is the highest
Mhm.
version of yourself in this world?
Well, and I find that, a lot of the clients that I work with, that's usually one of my first questions is, are you connected to something outside of yourself? Because I think you're right in the fact that we have this kind of universal crisis of spirituality, whatever that means to the individual person, being connected to something outside of self, because we focus so much here, that,
Randy, you know who Dr. Wayne Dyer is?
yes.
Okay, so he has my favorite kind of acronym for this. He calls
Okay.
it EGO,
Yeah.
EGO, edging God out
Yeah.
with our ego. And
Yeah.
there's the separation that God wants to, the ego wants to compete. It
Yeah.
wants to think you're separate from what's missing in your life, and it thinks that you're different than what you really are should be attached to.
Yeah, and it's interesting on a personal note, kind of in our world, in my family, and what we operate in the athletics space. My husband's a college basketball coach. Ego
Cool.
is everywhere, right? You've got these athletes, and usually what you find is the ones who can balance that, right? Competitiveness with giving back too, and not focusing so much on self. Those are some of the greatest ones.
Oh my gosh, a quote from the book is when you have everything you need, you
Yeah,
get everything you want. When you
exactly.
can live in contentment, when you
Mhm.
live out of the two-ness and into the oneness. I love William Shakespeare. He has this great quote. He says, "My crown is on my heart, not on my head, nor decked in diamonds and Indian stones. My crown is called contentment. A crown it is seldom kings enjoy because we're so caught up in the seeking and the comparison and needing to win and do something better than somebody else instead of live. You can learn to live in that contentment. That's what kind of being a nowist is, living in content, oneness, surrendering to God's will, being connected to this moment with your intentions and one of the greatest gifts we've ever been given, which is the power of our imagination,
Mhm.
connected to that intention, your life will transform.
So I think the biggest question, and I'll just hit you right off the bat with
Hit
it,
me.
is how? How does one do that when they're so caught up? And I mean, we create habits from childhood on, right? So if we live in a world that does not value kind of that spiritual side and that contentment side, how does one start to shift to that contentment, to living in the now?
Well, what happens is we're caught up in our habits. We're caught up in habits. We're caught up in rituals that don't serve us. And until you have awareness, the light of awareness must shine down on you. And that can shine at any time. You just have to be open to it. You have to really see the contrast of I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, my shoulders are tense. At night before I go to bed, I'm thinking about everything that went wrong in my day. And then you have this terrible inertia and momentum happening. But people are missing the awareness. That's what books like my book and all
Yeah.
these great teachings out there that teach you how to have awareness to your problems, to your rituals.
Mhm.
Wordworth or Emerson says, habits rule the unreflecting herd. Habits rule the unreflecting herd. We're all ruled by our habits. So to answer your question, we have to interrupt these old habits and these old patterns, start new rituals, but start them in an effective time. Before you go to bed at night, you're in this, you probably studied brainwave frequencies and, we're talking in alpha, beta right now, but when you get into delta and theta brainwave frequencies, which are very subconscious programmable, before you go to bed, if you spend the last 5 minutes of your day focused on what it is you want, how you want to show up tomorrow, what went well about your day, and you start conditioning yourself because whatever you hold in your awareness, the last 5 minutes of your day will marinate in your subconscious for 4 hours. So people need to interrupt these patterns. It can be programmed, reprogrammed. I mean, Dr. Joe Dispenza, who's a wonderful teacher, I use a lot of his teachings in my one-on-one coachings. Also, he lives here in Santa Barbara, where I live. I've never met him, but I hope to run into him synchronistically sometime. But it's about retraining your neuroplasticity mind. You have to really, he calls it Hebb's law. Neurons that fire together, wire together. You reprogram your habits. You connect, but you start in the night and you start in the morning to interrupt those patterns. Then you start the day with new rituals. You'll find that your point of attraction will completely change, and your life will look like in 6 months, 66 days. It can look like a completely different person.
Yeah, I think one of the things, again, that I talk to my clients about is, like you said, ending the day and starting the day with gratitude. It doesn't matter if, you're kind of going through something, there can be gratitude in struggle. You can find gratitude in just about anything. And if you go to sleep with gratitude and then wake up with gratitude, then that does kind of shift the entire mindset of your day. You can find all kinds of lessons in adversity.
Well, remember that the law of attraction is never broken. Your point
Right.
of attraction is called the law of identical harvest. It's never broken. So
Mhm.
whatever you focus on expands. Wherever you put your attention on will get larger and bigger in your life and your point of awareness and your point of attraction.
Yeah.
So when you can start interrupting these patterns of stress and overwhelm and disease in the body
Mhm.
and habits that don't serve you, watching the news before you go to bed,
Oh gosh.
eating, late night treats at 8, 9 o'clock before you go to bed. Like these,
Right.
you can interrupt these simple habits. If you start making a choice and a new decision, then you start training your subconscious mind. When you're in your conscious waking state, it'll be so much easier to affect change because you're starting to work at a subconscious level. So
Mhm.
I don't know if you've studied our website yet, but we just are in the process of creating a feature-length film. We
Yes,
finished the screenplay
I
after.
wanted to talk about this. This is fascinating to me. I love to read and I love movies. So anything with a good story that really brings you in. So I do want to dig into this just a bit.
Well, what happens is if you Steve Jobs had this wonderful quote. He said, "The storytellers are the most powerful beings on the planet. They shape the culture, they shape the trends. Think about it. The Bible is the beautiful story, the New Testament specifically of Jesus, right? Of the disciples, the 12 disciples, and Matthew, Luke, Mark, and Paul, all these wonderful stories. And you think about the Tao Te Ching, this wonderful story from Lao Tzu that he told 2,500 years ago to the gatekeeper of the temple, a story about these ways of living, 81 verses.
Yeah.
There's so many great books, but they all come from a story. So we learn from stories.
Yeah.
So the book that you're holding, The Nowist, Finding the Signs to Your Ultimate Desires in No Time, that is a story about how I found the present moment in my own personal experience to be the most powerful way of living, and then how to use that in everyday practical life. That's what the story teaches. So we decided, we've done 2 live events. I've done coaching. I've been doing this about 7 years. Toured the world speaking, spoken to high schools, middle schools, businesses, real estate, so many different ways that I've affected people in this world through the teaching. But I figured, if instead of doing a third live event, I thought, let's spend the next 2 years. The last live event was in 2022. Let's spend the next 2 years creating a feature length film that has a story in it about transformation, about emerging from trauma, because we had just come out of COVID when I had this idea and this inspiration that God basically just landed on me with this inspiration idea. And I went to one of my best friends, who's an incredible author, investigative journalist. He's written 27 books. He's a really good friend of mine. So we spent 2 years woodshedding and creating this story. And now we finished it about a month and a half ago. And we've
Wow.
got a Hollywood screenwriter, we have a director, we have a producer. We're just looking to fund it.
Yeah.
And this story is about helping people emerge from trauma. It's like shining the light of awareness on this dark subconscious unresolved trauma. Because there
Hmm.
was one quote that I read by Carl Jung that set me off on this path. And he says, until you make the unconscious conscious, the unconscious will rule your life and you'll call it fate. And then I found a stat from the NIH that said 2/3 of the planet has an unresolved trauma that they don't even know they have because it's disassociated.
Yeah.
So we've created this story. If you go to billymandarino.com, or if you go to For Now Film, FORNOW film.com,
Mhm.
you can see a trailer. You can see how you can help support, because it's a movie/movement.
And speaking of synchronicity, I think it's perfectly timed. We are obviously going through a global shift. I mean, I don't think anybody can deny
Yes.
that, we've gone through kind of this very spiritual crisis for decades, maybe even longer. And there's something happening, and something like this, I think, again, the timing cannot be
Randy, you're a
any
spiritual
more.
teacher. You're a spiritual teacher, correct?
I try to be.
You're a healer. You're a healer,
Right.
right? You're a healer.
Yes.
You know your dharma. Dharma is a Sanskrit word for purpose. You're an incredible mother, wife, someone who's showing up in the world to make people's lives better, to shine the light in the darkness of the world and people's lives and your neighbors' lives and humanity and the clients you work with.
Hmm.
So it's about how can we serve, not what's in it for me. And I just find that the more that we as a collective group who've just come out of the most traumatic experience in human history, COVID,
Hmm.
the pandemic, the negative energy field on this planet was just suppressed. It was overwhelmed so much so that that coherent energy was in such a negative state that it affected people's health. It affected, obviously, my daughter being a high school student, going 2 years to that affected her
Yeah.
subconscious, stress, overwhelm, anxiety, suicide rates have
Yeah.
just skyrocketed. So yes, I believe that this movie is not for me. It's how it came through me, not for me, kind of like the book. And I just
Absolutely.
want to find out how I can serve humanity. And this is my big call.
Um, yes, and my hope is that there's many, 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 many more people that will take that message and then integrate it also, because I think it will take a kind of a collective, um,
Absolutely. It is. It's the beginning. It's
yeah.
called in the Bible, it's called the new earth,
Hmm.
right? There was an old earth and a new earth. I believe we are in the transition into that new earth, which is, I mean, Jesus is making a comeback in a big way.
Yeah.
I mean, Christianity, to speak, I'm a Christian, to speak as from that lens, that you can just see that the light is being shined and the darkness, as it's, sorry to get preachy on you, but
No, gosh,
in
no, go
St.
ahead.
Paul, St. Paul says that the light that shines on the darkness, the light, transforms that darkness into light itself. So
Yeah.
I believe that's why this new earth is coming of age.
It's
It's
a dawning.
it is. And we've come out of this birthing pang, if you will, of the COVID-19, of this transformation that we're, this metamorphosis, like a monarch butterfly that we're coming out of. And it's going to be beautiful. It's already in process. And all of us, if we can focus on this light, being the light of the world, then we can help change the world.
I mean, you can definitely feel it. You can definitely feel it. Now, let
Absolutely.
me ask you a personal question, if you don't mind. did you grow up a Christian? What was your spiritual path like? What was your awakening like?
Well,
And
I'm from
where
six.
did it stem from?
Well, I'm from six kids, four sisters, and two brothers.
Mhm.
Big family, big Italian family, and raised in Spokane, Washington.
Okay.
My mom and dad got divorced when I was 7, and my mom got 3 kids. My dad got 3 kids, and I remember being
Interesting.
raised in church and praying, but having a different connection to my prayer life and to Jesus
Mhm.
and God in a different way than my brothers and sisters. I just, even as a little boy, I just remember praying at night on my knees. I remember feeling and then I would talk to my brother about it and my sisters. And now, I mean, I'm a middle kid and I'm 57. And I just think of how we've changed our lives and how we've grown up together. And all of our sisters and brothers pick their own path, which is cool. And there's no judgment.
Sure.
I just, as a little boy, knew that I was called to connect that light that is Jesus, that is God, that is prayer, that
Mhm.
is communing with the Holy Spirit at a different degree, it was a calling that I've been answering it was in my heart. I didn't even know as a little boy. I didn't really know, but it kept evolving, especially through my parents' divorce. I would lean hard. I started reading the Bible heavily, like at 12 and 13, even though our family kind of separated and our church life had changed. But I just went deeper. And then it's so interesting. And I feel now as I look in hindsight that it was all perfect. It was all meant to be the way it is. And I learned to bless my problems and make them my spiritual practice. And that's really what's led to this teaching, the movie, the coaching, just showing up and knowing that now I feel like I'm focused on being a better Christian and being a better servant to that mission in the world because I feel like that's my purpose.
Yeah. It's fascinating to me how someone who can come out of trauma, whether it's divorce or in my own personal case, um, it was, I'm the product of a teenage pregnancy, kind of a dysfunctional situation. My father had substance abuse issues, mental health issues, ended up taking his life when I was 11. But I'm always really curious, kind of just self-reflective of, there's two different paths I could have taken. Why did I choose the one that I did that led me to the life that I have now, one that I desired? And then someone else in my situation would have taken another one, right? So there's all this like self-reflective curiosity of, is that a connectedness to something outside of self? How do you get trapped in kind of victimhood and go a different way? So how would you guide someone like me who decides, I don't even know if decides is the right word, but kind of gets caught in that cycle of victimhood and can't get out of it?
So we all have, and that's where our movie comes in. That's why this piano of purpose, I kind of call it, where God just like, boom, this is what's happening. And there's no way I could not answer the call
Right.
because I do feel my unresolved childhood trauma. Here's an interesting stat, Brandy, and I'm definitely going to get around to your question, but
Oh, yeah, sure.
61% of men have an unresolved childhood trauma. 51% of women have an unresolved childhood trauma that they don't even know they have. And that's what our story is about. Thomas, the protagonist, we chose a man because in that stat globally, that is the bigger unresolved trauma. Because big boys don't cry. Be tough, suck it up. Be the provider. Like just don't be with your emotions. And that was true for me as a young boy. And I see when I find that there is this traumatic experience, it's subconscious, it's disassociated, it's just
Right.
deep. You don't even know you have it. How you chose, that's what's amazing about you, is you did choose the light over the darkness.
Hmm.
And it is a choice. But real quick to digress, what was it in you that made that choice? Because you had two roads, right? That you could have gone down.
Absolutely. And again, I've reflected on this quite a bit, and maybe that's what it is that I was kind of willing to reflect on where I came from, the choices that I wanted to make that were different than what kind of led my parents to the situations that they were in. I really kind of held on to this vision of what I wanted my life to look like, what I wanted to
So it was your
give.
imagination, right? Your imagination
Sure.
kind of clicked into that,
Exactly.
opposed to
Exactly.
focusing on how bad it was going to be. And I was going to end up like my father. It was
No.
like I see the light and I see this image. So it was was your imagination kind of the catalyst for seeing what could
It
happen?
had to be. It had to be because I always had, I don't ever remember a time where I didn't have the vision of what I wanted for myself and my life and my family and
In the
really
darkest hours, right?
it
In the darkest
resolved
hours.
around it resolved around peace and contentment and giving back and all of that. So
How old
yeah,
were you?
I was 11 when he took his own life, but there was a lot of turmoil leading up to that. So, I
But
mean,
when
like I
you
said,
had that imagine that epiphany, that satori, that imaginative vision, how old were you then?
I couldn't even answer that question. I don't ever remember not having it.
So it's always been who you are.
Yes. Yeah. I
You
don't
know what?
ever remember a time where I felt like this wasn't a possibility.
So to answer your question, how I feel like I'm supposed to answer the question, because I believe in intuition and feeling that is God answering our prayers. We're on our knees, we're sending out a prayer of guidance, of
Yeah.
sometimes supplication. But when you have that gut intuition, you have that feel or vision as you did, or
Yeah.
that intuitive gut response, that's it. And so in this moment, I feel like God is telling me that it is the I am presence. If you remember in Exodus, Moses is told only once in the entire Bible what God's name is. And if you remember at the burning bush, Moses asked God's name, and God said, "My name is I am that I am. I will go by no other name."
Yeah.
So, how do you use your I am presence? Your I am presence is a powerful energy, God source energy that we come from, that we return to
Yeah.
call in. So I am is a trigger is also imagination. The first two letters in imaginations are I, letter M.
Yeah.
So that's why I believe imagination, this is in the book as well, is one of the greatest gifts we've ever been given from God. And I love that you described it the way you did, because you said there was a vision that you held on to that you didn't know. You didn't
Right.
know any other vision but that vision, because our thoughts are things. And when you can use your I am presence connected with your imagination and surrendering to God and giving thanks and gratitude for whatever it is in your life, that I am presence calls in it and you surrender to it. And then your life changes, because that vision is like a North Star, a beacon. It's keeping you on that path, because the other choice doesn't even enter your awareness. And
No.
when you have the I am consciousness and you have your focused intention on the vision, the universal law of abundance, the law of identical harvest activates. And
Right.
then you look where you are, this beautiful family, three kids, an amazing husband. Like, right? I can tell from your
Yeah.
smile and from your energy, you have a wonderful, blessed life. And I can tell that. So I'm just so honored to know you now and to speak with you and share this with you, because I feel like you understood and you're a perfect example of that teaching.
Well, I appreciate that. No, yeah, it's been a fascinating journey. And I do kind of want to touch on kind of the signs and synchronicities and being able to recognize those as they are appearing. I know we were talking just a little bit before we started recording about those because our life, like I said, we operate in the college athletics space. My husband's a college basketball coach, and it's been an interesting couple years for us personally. Um, and there was a lot of signs leading up to kind of those 2 years of change and I wouldn't even say turmoil per se, but things that we didn't expect. Um, and there were kind of these signs that just kept appearing. And how does one really kind of understand what those are? You recognize them, but how do you understand them?
So that's the thing. So here's the first. They happen to synchronicities. I mean, there's a chapter in my book called Synchronistic Thinking.
Hmm.
Forget the number that it is, but synchronistic thinking. That chapter explains it in depth. But I'm going to give you my experience with it,
Yes.
because when you learn to live as a nowist, when you learn to focus your intention in the present moment as a way of life,
Hmm.
you gain this mystical power of awareness, Christ consciousness, if you will,
Yeah.
Buddha nature. There's all these different names for it. But when you live in that oneness, when you live out of physical time, you shift into this different kind of realm of awareness. And so you're not surprised. Like literally, I have, if in the 17th chapter of my book is called The Journey Journal. There's about 30 or 40 examples of synchronicities and how I identified them and how they occurred in my life. And most people would say, "Oh, that's just random happenstance. That's such coincidence." But in my last, I
I
don't know,
don't
10
believe
years,
in that.
I've got 100 of them. So just 30 of them in the book, but
Yeah.
I have my own journey. I call it the journey journal. I have my own journey journal. I have 100 of them since 2000. I have about 10 years. I keep track of them because what happens is I call it kind of the reverse doubting Thomas. You know, Thomas was like, Jesus, show me the marks in your hands and your feet. I won't, but all the other 11 disciples believe it's Jesus is resurrected, but Thomas wants to see the physical proof.
Yeah.
Well, that's because he needed physical proof. Well, I call it the reverse doubting Thomas because these synchronicities show up in your life and you have physical proof that they happen, but you have the faith because you don't need it, but because it's already proved itself to you because it occurred,
Right.
because you experienced it. And so recently in my life, I'll give you an example of how I interpreted this synchronicity and how it was so obvious, like it literally was like a bucket of cold water was thrown on me. And they happen all the time. One just happened yesterday. I'll start with the one that happened yesterday and go
Okay.
back to the one that happened January 1st of this year. So yeah, so do you know what the number 1111 means?
I so yeah, yes.
And you're saying that because you recently had an experience with it, correct?
For the last 2 years, yes.
Okay, so that's my number of synchronicity.
Yeah.
It must be your number of synchronicity.
Yes.
It's not just our number, it's a universal.
I wasn't even going to bring it up because I felt crazy.
No, no. So do you know what's happening right now, Brandy?
No, please tell me because I
This is
would
a
love to know.
synchronicity. This is a spiritual breadcrumb.
Yeah.
That's a
Okay.
Dr. Wayne term, spiritual breadcrumbs. I've used it. It's all in my book. I love it. I live it. And when they show up, and 1111 is an angel number. It's a universal sign that means that divine forces, guardian angels are overseeing you. They're walking you through this. They're trying to get your attention.
Yeah.
So yesterday,
Obviously.
I'm gonna start with the end and then go back to January 1st.
Okay.
So yesterday, I'm one of my dear friends lost their entire house in the Palisades fire. We live in Santa Barbara, Palisades, an hour and a half from us. 5,000 people ascended. And I'm a realtor and a property manager. That's what I do. That's how I monetize. That's how I pay
Yeah.
for all the Nowist teaching. That's how I help people. It's literally an act of service and kindness to this world. But as a property manager and a realtor, my good friend lost everything.
Hmm.
And he just been he and his wife have been married a year and they lost everything. And so he showed up here. It was January 9th or 10th that the fires happened, I believe. Is that right? Yeah. And he calls me a couple of days later and he sees that we hadn't talked to him for like a year. We just kind
Hmm.
of got busy and out of touch. But he sees an ad for one of these properties I manage, and there's such little inventory in Santa Barbara anyway, but with all these families in town, the inventory was just decimated. And this is a spectacularly beautiful ocean view. It's in the Riviera. It's a gorgeous property and I managed a property that he lived in for during the pandemic.
Yeah.
He lived in this property. So I hadn't seen him for a couple of years. So this property just perfectly lined up for him and his wife and their two dogs. And it was just I love being part of this synchronicity. When I get to be part of it, it's such a gift. And I just give such gratitude to God for it because it's great to be like an angel or just kind of be part of this miracle. And they're crying and I'm hugging them or just we're saying that we're all kind of praying and we're holding each other. We're just praying and just in gratitude that they had signed the lease. And yesterday I moved them in because the owners had not left yet. They had to go rent and they were in a hotel for over a month because they couldn't find a rental.
Right.
And it's been really hard for our neighbors to the south. And I've been blessed to help a lot of families find properties. But this was my favorite story because yesterday I move them in. They really don't have much of anything because everything burned up.
Right.
And they're two dogs. I check them in. I probably spent a half hour walking through the property, showing how things work. Just so excited. You know, I had a bottle of wine for them and a card and all the good stuff and the keys. And then literally a half an hour. My wife is a high school teacher, 30 years here at a local high school, and she's super busy. And our daughter had a softball game hour and a half away. And it's about what time? It was like 1 o'clock yesterday. And I'm walking out of just, shutting the door and I'm letting them have their life and finally have a respite from this trauma they've had the last month and a half. And so I walk out the door and start walking up the hill to my car. And my wife sends me a text. And the text is at my daughter's softball game, and the scoreboard is blinking 11-11, and it's blinking 11 and 11, and she has no idea what I'm doing, but the timing of it. And Stephen, my buddy, is a spiritual teacher as well. He's a spiritual coach. He's an incredible force in this nation for helping leaders and CEOs find the spiritual path in their profession. So I texted to him this morning, But I just got the chills at the moment. I'm getting the chills again because it was like, this is the sign, brother, that this divine experience is all meant to be. It's all happening, even the hard things. You're guided. The guardian angels are with you. The universe is showing us this 11. He knows what 1111 is too. It's one of his numbers. So I
Yeah.
texted to him this morning. He hasn't got back to me yet because it was too early. And there's a perfect synchronicity. And 1111 showed up exactly. And my wife had no idea. She
Yeah.
sends it to me because she knows 1111's been my number for 20 years. Like
Sure.
she's known that. And so that was yesterday's divine synchronicity and spiritual breadcrumb.
Yeah.
And so the
I
one
have I have chills just because I've never really, other than kind of, in my own house, have we had these conversations because it just felt so strange. Like you just don't even want to say it out loud.
no, say
I've
it,
never
share
had
it.
somebody give it back to me saying, that this is something that, is happening to other people as well.
It's
Um,
happening to billions of people,
yeah.
and billions of people are waking up. We're calling it the new earth.
Mhm.
That's because of what the Bible calls. I mean, just saying
Yeah.
there was an old heaven and an old earth, and now there's a new heaven and a new earth being born, and we're part of it, and we're
Yeah.
becoming awakened to it. And that's why I say Jesus is making a comeback because wonderful story shows like The Chosen. I don't know if you've seen The Chosen, that
No.
incredible. Oh my gosh, it's great. It's about how Jesus found the 12 disciples, and his walk. It's great. It's on
Yeah.
Angels. It's called The Chosen. Chosen app. It's free. There's
Okay.
like
Okay.
4 seasons. The fifth. Anyway, it's wonderful. But I just say
Okay.
Jesus is making a comeback because the light in the world. Jesus says, "I am the light of the world." He also says, "You are the light of the world."
Mhm.
I call my daughter the light of the world. When I get her off to school every day, I just as we before we
Yes.
started, she just had finished an interview. She's so excited about college next year, and I said, I always say, "You're the light of the world." I just want her to feel that she has this beacon in her hope of
Yeah.
her heart, of her existence that kids nowadays don't pay attention to because they're in comparison mentality. And Mark
Mhm.
Twain says comparison is the death of joy. And I see our youth's joy being crushed. And you have young kids, so it's
Yes.
really important that they know how bright they are, how special they are, how they don't have to compete with anybody. They got everything.
Yes, yes. And that's kind of our hope, so like I said, my oldest will be a senior next year. We will be sending him off into the world. And that is kind of my hope is that they learn to give back and not be so self
Absorbed.
yes.
Yeah.
I don't even know if it's self-centered, self-absorbed, but not focus so much on self, still have goals and aspirations and whatnot, but don't let that be the only thing. And
No.
again, the world that we operate in, that's very much a focus, and it's a balance for us, given the way that we kind of think and operate and feel. Um, how can we be part of that change in the atmosphere that we operate in?
Be the example. Yeah. Be the change, as Gandhi says, that you want to see in the world and let them be the change. But let them, here's the thing that's missing, Brandy, authenticity.
Oh gosh.
And here's a recent scientific study they did. They did a study. There's this thing called a Faraday chamber where they put this person in this chamber and
Mhm.
you can't experience any energy, no Wi-Fi. You ever heard of this story?
Yes. Well, no, but I mean, yes, I know what the Faraday chamber is, but I like
So they
haven't
put
looked
this
too much into it.
they did this study and they put this person in and they could experience no energy from the outside, no
Right.
Wi-Fi, no 3, 5G, whatever,
Nothing.
nothing. And they had them experience an emotion.
Mhm.
And what emotion do you think was the most resonant, the most powerful out of any emotion that a human being could feel?
Fear.
That's your final answer? Guess what it is? You
What?
would think it would be love, right?
No, I would think it would be fear. I've
The
seen
most
people be fear
powerful
driven.
emission off the human body energy field
Yeah.
is authenticity,
Interesting.
which is to
Okay.
me, the authenticity is code for I am presence.
Yeah.
The I am who you really are, your
Mhm.
authentic self. That's why I'm teaching people or sharing with people the authenticity of who they are, who they
Yeah.
come from, who they return to, the oneness with the I am presence. Because I believe authenticity is I am, which is God, which is we are part of God, we return to God, we come from God. So that authenticity is the most powerful emanation off a human being.
Well, it's
So
really interesting. I just did an interview for a local magazine that was featuring the podcast and my coaching and whatnot. And one of the questions was, what characteristic do you attribute your success to, or whatever it was. And it was that. It was authenticity, like the willingness to really just connect and be yourself. There's absolutely no reason not to be exactly who you are, say what you think, say what you feel. I mean, we build up these walls when we kind of forego that authenticity. We're putting out what we think we should be or what we should be saying or whatnot. And I don't resonate with that at all. And it's really that simple. It doesn't have to be complicated.
That's the problem with the youth nowadays is they're
Yeah.
so caught up in how many likes is my life worth,
Yeah.
right? How your value is in how many views you get, how many followers you have, and it's all
Mhm.
comparison mentality.
Yeah.
And that kills your authenticity because you never feel like you're enough.
Yeah.
And the
Absolutely.
mantra for the you should be, I am enough. I am enough. Because there it is, God's name, your authentic self, authenticity, and being enough.
Yeah.
And there's the problem. We need to teach them, or they need to learn from their own experience. But once again, like you said, I mean, you had some trauma. I've had trauma. We've all had trauma. We've all had hard things to work through because we're supposed to. Because how do you build muscle? You have to press up against a lot of resistance. You need contrast to get that evolution of your soul and of your spirit. So
And
we
I
have to
do
lean
not,
in.
one of the things that I try to teach also, especially with my personal clients, is don't don't resist adversity, right?
Yeah,
We
lean
can't
in.
avoid it at all. You should be prepared for it and to get through it. I remember thinking as a child, this one bad thing happened to me, losing my father to suicide. And I tell this story all the time on the podcast. I thought that we were all owed one trauma in life and then that nothing else bad would happen. And I was so wrong and I wasn't prepared, right? Like I checked it off when I was a kid and I was going to smooth sailing from there because I was going to make choices that were going to be healthy for my life. And that was not the case. I mean, there was
Of course.
adversities later and traumas later. And it wasn't till probably my early 30s where I really started going through this process of kind of resolving those, kind of going backwards and dealing with them that I was like, you know what? What in the world was I thinking? There's going to be adversity from now until the day I die, and I better
Absolutely.
start preparing.
That's it. And I've
Yeah.
called them my spiritual practice. When I have strong adversity, I've had some life-threatening things happen during COVID. I had a near-death experience. I was paralyzed for 21 days just in
Mm,
2021 because of COVID. I got
mm.
this thing called Guillain-Barré syndrome from
Ah,
COVID. I was
yes.
the first one in this county of 460,000 people, Santa Barbara County, to
Mhm.
get Guillain-Barré syndrome from
Yeah.
the COVID, not from a vaccine, just
Mhm.
from COVID.
Yeah.
So I had 21 days in the hospital, had to learn to walk again, could not see my wife and daughter, near death experience, almost suffocated because when you in
Yeah.
Guillain-Barré syndrome, you
Yeah.
notice when all your nerves
Yep.
basically they get eaten like a piranha eats all the myelin sheath. So I made that my spiritual practice, and it was hard, trust me,
Sure.
to be paralyzed and not know, and the doctors not knowing what was wrong with me that first day.
Yeah.
But once the next morning came, and I called them these two white knights that stood at the foot of my hospital bed, they thought they knew what I had because I'm a little bit claustrophobic. I had to spend 4.5 hours in
Mm.
an MRI tube, and they could not knock me out. So I had to meditate, pray, chant, sing, do
Wow.
whatever I could to get. I call it going quantum. I got
Yeah.
out of my body because the stress, the overwhelm was so great. Imagine 4.5 hours not being able to move.
No.
And that was a spiritual practice. So
Yeah.
that's all served me. I'm not saying it's all wonderful, but in the time that I
No.
had to go through, I understand now that it was my spiritual practice to find out how I can use that to serve other people. And that's what we do in life. If you really want to find the joy and the bliss in your life, find out how you can serve people with your authentic self.
Yes, I 100% agree. And I think that's a fantastic way to kind of wrap this conversation up. Again, I know you've got other speaking engagements, and I'm just grateful that you took the time to spend with me and my audience for, the 45 minutes or so that we did. So to wrap up though, where can people find you, find the book, find information on the film, all of it, your teachings, everything?
First of all, Brandy, thank you so much. I really feel connected and honored to be into your mission because I feel like your heart and your truth is on point. I get a sense of you being an authentic person. And Thank you for that. I
Oh,
appreciate you
thank you.
inviting me. So if you go to billymandarino.com, it's my name.com.
Mhm.
Mandarino is spelled like the mandarin orange, but with an O on the end. Billymandarino.com. In there, it links out to trailers for the film. There's tons of free teachings. We have over 620 videos on our YouTube channel, all free teaching. There's so much on LinkedIn, Facebook, TikTok, we're Instagram, we're everywhere. And I'm just here to be of service to a world in stress and overwhelm and anxiety. And to be a nowist is not as difficult as people would think. It's just there's a lot of free information out there, and I'd love to be of service to whoever's viewing or listening. And it's my honor to be of service to y'all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Billy. I really appreciate it.
All right, peace to you, Brandy.
Peace to you.